What happens when a single act of kindness costs you everything you know? For Elena Vance, a quiet book restorer. It was a normal Tuesday until the gunshots. In a split second, she throws herself in front of a stranger, a man with eyes as dark and dangerous as the storm brewing in the city sky. She takes a bullet meant for him, and her world fades to black. But when she wakes up, it's not in a sterile hospital ward. It's in a lavish penthouse suite, a gilded cage where her savior, the enigmatic Alessandro Moretti, watches over her. She thinks he's just a grateful businessman. She has no idea she just saved the most feared Mafia boss in the city, and by doing so has just become his most prized possession. The scent of old paper and leather was Elena Vance's sanctuary. In her small studio nestled in a gentrifying but still gritty corner of Vidya City, she performed miracles on crumbling spines and faded ink. It was a quiet life, a meticulous one, a world she had built to insulate herself from the chaos that had once shattered her family. That chaos had a sound, the screech of tires a sickening thud, and then a silence so profound it had echoed in her ears for the 10 years since her younger brother Liam was taken by a hit and run. She had been late to meet him that day. That guilt was a ghost that lived in the ink stains on her fingers and the permanent sadness in her hazel eyes. That Tuesday, a chill October wind rattled the large window of her street-level shop, Vance Restoration. She was hunched over a 17th century copy of Dante's Inferno, delicately reapplying gold leaf to the cover. It was nearly 7:00 p.m., the sky already a bruised purple. She was just packing up her mind on a cup of tea and a quiet evening when the first sound ripped through the calm. It wasn't a car backfiring. It was a sharp, percussive crack, a gunshot. Elena froze, her heart seizing in her chest. Another crack followed. Closer this time, and then the sound of shattering glass from the bakery across the street. People on the sidewalk screamed, a chaotic symphony of panic. Her training, born from a decade of anxiety, was to drop, to hide, to make herself small. She ducked behind her heavy oak worked, her breath catching in her throat. Peeking through the legs of the table, she saw them. 2 black sedans had cornered a third, a sleek, dark Maserati. Men in dark suits were exchanging fire, the muzzle flashes illuminating the street in terrifying staccato bursts. It was like a scene from a movie too violent and unreal for her quiet corner of the world. Then she saw him. A man was thrown from the driver's side of the Maserati, stumbling onto the pavement. He was tall, dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that was now scuffed with dirt. Even in the chaos, he moved with a dangerous grace, taking cover behind the vehicle's door. But he was pinned. The attackers were advancing. One of them broke from cover, raising his weapon for a clear shot. Elena's world narrowed to that single moment. The man behind the car door looked up, his eyes scanning for an escape route, and for a fraction of a second, his gaze met hers through the shop window. His eyes were the color of dark, aged whiskey, and in them she didn't see fear. She saw cold, calculated fury. He was no ordinary victim. But it didn't matter. What mattered was the gunman, the raised weapon, the inevitability of the shot. Liam's ghost whispered in her ear, "You were late. You weren't there." She didn't think. She just acted. In a surge of adrenaline that was utterly foreign to her, Elena shoved her work aside, burst through the door of her shop, and screamed, "Get down!" She ran the 10 foot of pavement that separated them, a wild, foolish, and suicidal dash. The man with the whiskey eyes turned his face a mask of disbelief. She didn't stop. She crashed into him, using all of her 120 pulbs to shove him backward, breaking his line of sight from the gunman. They tumbled to the ground, his hard body cushioning her fall. For a heartbeat, there was only the scent of his cologne sandalwood and something metallic like rain on steel and the solid wall of his chest against her. Then a searing white-hot agony tore through her left shoulder. The force of it was like being hit by a freight train. A cry was ripped from her throat, a sound of pure animal pain. The world tilted, the colors of the streetlights bleeding into one another. The sounds of the gunfight seemed to fade, replaced by a rushing in her ears. Her head was cradled in his lap. He was leaning over her, his face no longer cold, but contorted with a raw, savage fury she had never seen on another human being. He was shouting something, but the words wouldn't connect. His hands were pressing down on her shoulder, trying to staunch the bleeding his expensive suit, jacket already turning a dark, wet crimson. "Stay with me." His voice was a low, urgent growl cutting through the haze. "Look at me. Stay with me." She tried to focus on his face, the sharp line of his jaw, the dark stubble, the intensity of his stare. He wasn't a stranger anymore. His face was the last thing she would ever see. She had failed Liam, but maybe, just maybe, she hadn't failed this man. As her vision tunneled to black, her last conscious thought was that his eyes were not just angry, they were promising retribution, and somehow she knew he would deliver it. Consciousness returned not as a sudden jolt, but as a slow, creeping dawn. The first thing Elena registered was the silence. It wasn't the beeping, bustling silence of a hospital. It was a deep, insulated quiet, the kind that money buys. The second was the scent not antiseptic and bleach, but a faint, clean fragrance of lavender and chamomile. She blinked her eyes open. The ceiling above her was not made of sterile acoustic tiles, but was adorned with intricate plasterwork, a soft chandelier casting a warm golden glow. She was in a bed, a massive one, with sheets so soft they felt like water against her skin. An IV line was expertly taped to her right arm. The drip, a steady, silent metronome. Panic began to bubble in her chest. She tried to sit up, but a sharp, biting pain in her left shoulder sent her gasping back against the pillows. "Easy, don't move." The voice was the one from the street, the low, commanding growl that had been her last anchor to the world. He was sitting in an armchair in the corner of the room, which she now saw was not a hospital room, but a lavishly decorated bedroom suite. He stood and walked towards the bed, his movements fluid and silent. The charcoal suit was gone, replaced by a simple black t-shirt and dark trousers that did nothing to hide the powerful physique beneath. His face was clean-shaven now, revealing a strong jaw and a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled. Those whiskey-dark eyes watched her with an unnerving intensity. "Where am I?" Eleanor's voice was a rough whisper. "You're safe," he said, the answer both reassuring and deeply evasive. "You're in my home. I have a private medical wing. The best doctor in the city, a man named Dr. Alistair Finch, operated on you. The bullet went clean through. No permanent damage to the muscle, but it's going to hurt for a while. His home, a private medical wing." The words swam in her head, refusing to form a coherent picture. "I should be in a hospital. My friend Clara Ara, she'll be worried. I need to call her. That's not possible right now." His tone was flat, non-negotiable. "What do you mean it's not possible?" The panic sharpened into fear. "Who are you?" He paused, studying her face as if searching for something. "My name is Alex, and you, Elena Vance, saved my life." He knew her name. Of course, her wallet. The men who did this are still out there. He continued, his voice dropping slightly. They saw you. Until they are found, you are not safe. No one you contact is safe. You will stay here under my protection. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact. Her protector, her savior, was now her jailer. The room with its silk wallpaper and mahogany furniture suddenly felt like the most beautiful prison she had ever seen. A gilded for how long? She asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. For as long as it takes, the days that followed blurred into a strange routine. Dr. Finch, a kind-faced older man with tired eyes that had seen too much, checked on her twice a day. A silent, stern-faced woman brought her meals on a silver tray, and Alex was a constant presence. He would sit in the armchair sometimes, reading a newspaper, sometimes just watching her with that impenetrable gaze. He answered none of her important questions. He deflected queries about his business with vague mentions of investments and corporate security. He brushed aside her questions about the shooting, saying only that it was a business rivalry that got out of hand. But Elena was a restorer of old things. She knew how to look for the story beneath the surface to see the faint traces of what was hidden. She saw it in the way Alex's men, large, silent figures who patrolled the hallways, moved with the coiled readiness of predators. She saw it in the hushed, urgent phone calls he took in Italian, his voice turning to cold steel. And she saw it in him. Underneath the veneer of a concerned businessman was a man who radiated power and a chilling capacity for violence. One afternoon, desperate for a change of scenery, she convinced him to let her walk out onto the adjoining balcony. The view was staggering. She was in a penthouse, one that overlooked the entire city skyline, from the financial district's glass towers to the distant shimmer of the bay. This wasn't just wealth. It was a kingdom. You have a beautiful home, Alex, she said, her voice small against the vastness of the city. He came to stand beside her, his presence a solid wall of warmth against the autumn chill. It's just a place. Who are you really? She asked again, tired of the charade. He turned to face her, the setting sun catching in his dark hair. I'm the man who owes you his life. Right now, that's all you need to know. He was close. So close she could see the flexux of gold in his dark eyes. A strange current passed between them, a mixture of her fear and a burgeoning, terrifying curiosity. He was dangerous. Her every instinct screamed it. But there was also a pull, an undeniable connection forged in the crucible of violence on that street. He reached out his fingers, gently brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. His touch was surprisingly soft, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Get some rest, Elena, he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. You're safe here, I promise. But as he walked back inside, leaving her alone with the sprawling city at her feet, Elena knew she had never been in more danger in her entire life. She was trapped in the heart of a mystery, a pawn in a game she didn't understand. And the man who held all the cards was the one who both terrified and intrigued her in equal measure. She had saved a stranger, and in doing so had lost herself. As the wound in her shoulder began to heal, the scope of Elena's confinement expanded from the medical suite to the rest of the penthouse. It was a sprawling, sterilely beautiful space, all glass and chrome and shades of grey. It felt less like a home and more like a corporate fortress decorated with expensive art that seemed to have no personal meaning. The only warmth in the entire apartment was the library. It was her first request upon being able to walk properly. The library was a 2-story masterpiece with floor-to-ceiling shelves of dark cherrywood filled with leather-bound volumes. It was the one room that felt like him, a curated collection of classics, philosophy, and military history. It was here, surrounded by the familiar scent of books, that she began to feel a sliver of herself again. And it was here that she started to listen. The penthouse was chillant but not empty. Conversations happened in hushed tones behind closed doors, but the library's acoustics were surprisingly good. One evening, while reshelving a copy of The Prince by Machiavelli, a choice she found grimly appropriate, she heard Alex's voice from the adjacent study, sharper than usual. "The Falconese are getting bold, hitting me in broad daylight." Someone on the inside gave them my route. A second voice, deeper and calmer, responded, "We're looking. Leo is vetting the inner circle again. No one is above suspicion. Find him." Alex's voice was lethal. "I don't care what it takes. Find the traitor who put her in the line of fire. I want his head. Falconese, traitor, her in the line of fire." The words were puzzle pieces forming a picture she didn't want to see. She pressed her ear against the wall, her blood running cold. This was no business rivalry. This was a war. The man with the calm voice was Leo Giordano, Alex's second in command. He was tall and severe, with a scar that cut through his left eyebrow, and he looked at Elena with a mixture of professional respect for her actions and deep distrust of her presence. He was the gatekeeper, the enforcer, the one who anticipated Alex's needs before he even voiced them. The tension between her and Alex grew. A taut wire of unspoken questions and simmering attraction. He would join her in the library some evenings, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He never spoke of the Falcone or the traitor, but he asked about her work, about the delicate art of restoration. He was fascinated by her patience, the way she could breathe life back into things that were broken. "You see the value in things others would discard," he said one night, watching as she described the process of repairing water-damaged parchment. "Everything has a story," she replied, her gaze steady. "You just have to be willing to look closely enough to read it. Sometimes the damage is part of the story." His eyes darkened, a flicker of something raw and vulnerable in their depths. "And can all things be repaired?" "Not all," she said, softly. "Some things are broken forever." Their dinner that night was a masterpiece of unspoken things, seated across a long, formal dining table. They were two people from different worlds, bound by a single moment of violence. He asked about her family, and for the first time she told him about Liam. She spoke of her guilt, the heavy cloak she'd worn for a decade. He listened, his expression unreadable, and when she finished, he simply said, "It wasn't your fault, Elena. Sometimes the world is just a violent place, and we are caught in the crossfire." The way he said it with a chilling certainty made her realize he didn't just believe it. He lived it. Later, a reckless curiosity propelled her. While Alex was in a meeting in his study, she made her way to his bedroom. It was as stark and impersonal as the rest of the penthouse, except for a single-frame photograph on his nightstand. It was a picture of a younger Alex, perhaps in his late teens, standing next to an older, formidable-looking man with the same dark eyes. They both wore proud, confident expressions. Alex's father. She assumed the man he was before the world had made him this cold, guarded version of himself. Her search for a phone, a laptop, anything to connect her to the outside world proved fruitless. Everything was locked down. She was a ghost in his machine, completely isolated. The realization was suffocating. She had to know the truth. Not his carefully curated version of it, but the whole ugly story. Her chance came unexpectedly. She found an unlocked tablet on a charging station in the kitchen, left behind by one of the staff. Her fingers trembled as she typed her own name into the search bar. The results hit her like a physical blow. Mysterious shootout in Artisans Row. Woman injured. The article was brief, citing an ongoing investigation into what police are calling a gang-related dispute. It mentioned an unidentified woman, her being taken from the scene not by an ambulance, but by a private vehicle. But it was the second link that stole the air from her lungs. It was a society page from 2 years ago, a photo from a charity gala. There he was, looking handsome and dangerous in a tuxedo. The caption read, "Alessandro Moretti, son of the late Don Franco Moretti, at the annual Vidia Children's Hospital benefit." Moretti. The name was infamous in Viridia City, the Moretti crime family. For generations they had run the city's underworld with an iron fist. Drugs, gambling, extortion. Don Franco Moretti's reign had been legendary and brutal, and his son Alessandro was his heir. The man she had saved, the man who was holding her captive under the guise of protection, was not a businessman. He was the head of the Mafia. The tablet slipped from her nerveless fingers and clattered onto the marble floor. The sound echoed in the silent penthouse like a gunshot. She backed away from it as if it were a venomous snake, her mind reeling. Every kind word, every moment of connection, every promise of safety was a lie. A beautiful, intricate deception. She had run into a firefight to save a man from gangsters, only to find out she had saved the king of them all, and she was trapped in his castle high above a city that was his personal chessboard. The knowledge was a poison seeping into every interaction. Elena could no longer see Alex, the concerned, enigmatic man. She saw only Alessandro Moretti, the Dawn. The carefully constructed civility between them shattered, replaced by a brittle, fearful silence on her part, and a confused, watchful tension on his. He knew something had changed. He just didn't know she had finally unearthed his secret. She avoided him, confining herself to the library, the stacks of books, her only fortress. But the penthouse, once a vast sanctuary, now felt claustrophobically small. His presence was everywhere. In the silent tread of his guards, in the low murmur of his voice on the phone, in the way the entire space seemed to hold its breath when he entered a room. The confrontation she was dreading came 2 nights after her discovery. A storm was raging outside, throwing sheets of rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights were a glittering, distorted blur below. Elena was staring out at the tempest, her reflection a pale ghost in the glass when he spoke from behind her. "You're avoiding me, Elena." She turned slowly. He was standing by the fireplace, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows across his face, making his features seem harder, more severe. "I'm just tired," she lied, her voice thin. "No," he said, taking a step closer. "It's more than that. Ever since a few nights ago, you look at me like I'm a monster. What happened?" Her heart hammered in her chest. This was it. The precipice. "I know who you are." She whispered the words, tasting like ash. "I found an article. Alessandro Moretti." His expression didn't change, but a stillness came over him, the unnerving calm of a predator. The air crackled with the outspoken truth. He didn't deny it. He simply watched her waiting. All this time, she continued, her voice gaining a tremor of anger. "You let me believe you were just some businessman. This isn't protection. It's a kidnapping. I'm your prisoner. You are my guest." He counted his voice dangerously low. "A guest I am keeping alive." Do you have any idea what would happen to you if I let you walk out that door? The Falconese don't leave witnesses. They saw your face. They know you saved me. To them, you're not an innocent bystander anymore. You are one of mine. One of mine. The possessiveness in his tone sent a chill down her spine. I am not one of yours. I'm a book restorer. I fix old paper. I don't associate with murderers and criminals. The accusation hung in the air between them, a muscle feathered in his jaw. I have never lied to you, Elena. I simply omitted the parts I knew you couldn't handle. I am what I am. I was born into this. It's the only world I've ever known. So you kill people, you run rackets, you destroy lives. She challenged her fear being burned away by a white-hot rage. I protect my family. I run an organization. I do what is necessary to survive in a world where weakness is a death sentence. He bit back, his control finally snapping. And I did not ask for your help that day. You ran into my war. You took a bullet for me. That act tied you to me whether you like it or not. Suddenly a frantic buzzing came from the intercom on the wall. Alessandro strode over and pressed the button. It was Lau's voice, clipped and urgent. Boss, we have a breach. West entrance. 2 men. They got past the lobby security. Alessandro's transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The man arguing with her vanished. In his place was the dawn. His eyes turned to flint. He moved to a discreet panel on the wall, pressing his palm against it. A section of the bookshelf slid open, revealing a hidden armory of handguns and rifles. He pulled out a sleek black handgun, checked the magazine, and racked the slide with an efficient, practiced motion that made Elena flinch. Leo! Alessandro spoke into his watch, his voice calm and lethal. Seal the elevator in the stairwell. Take them alive if you can. I want to know who sent them. He turned to Elena, his face a grim mask. Stay here. Do not leave this room. He was about to leave when Elena grabbed his arm, her anger momentarily forgotten in a new wave of terror. Don't. Please just let the police handle it. He looked down at her hand on his arm, and then back at her face, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Elena in my world, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. We are the police. He pulled his arm free and was gone, leaving her alone in the library as the sounds of a muffled commotion began to echo from the far end of the penthouse, a door being slammed open, shouted commands in Italian, a sickening thud. She huddled behind a large leather armchair, her body trembling uncontrollably. This was her reality now. Gunfights weren't just on the street below. They were in her living room. The gilded core had shown its iron bars. A few minutes later, which felt like an eternity, Alessandro returned. He was unscathed, but there was a dark smudge on his cheek and a cold light in his eyes. Low with him. Falcone men, Leo reported curtly. Amateurs. They won't be talking. Alessandro just nodded his gaze, finding Elena, who was still crouched behind the chair. He walked over and knelt before her, his large frame making her feel small and fragile. Are you all right? He asked, his voice softer now. The commander gone, replaced by the man. She couldn't speak. She just stared at him, at the gun still tucked into the waistband of his trousers, at the casual way he and his man had just dealt with 2 intruders. She saw the full, horrifying truth of her situation. He was right. Leaving wasn't an option. The world outside was just as dangerous as the one inside this penthouse, and it was all because of him. Tears of fear, anger, and utter helplessness streamed down her face. "What have you done to my life?" she whispered. He reached out his hand, hesitating before he gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. His touch was a strange comfort in the heart of the chaos. "I've saved it," he answered, his voice raw with a conviction that chilled her to the bone. "And I'll keep saving it, no matter what it takes." The aftermath of the home invasion settled a grim new reality over the penthouse. The illusion of safety was shattered, leaving behind the stark truth of Alessandro's world. Elena was no longer just a protected guest. She was a target. Her life was intrinsically linked to his, and the only way to reclaim any part of it was to help him end the war that had snared her. This was the devil's bargain she now faced. Alessandro, for his part, seemed to understand the shift. He dropped the pretense of being a simple businessman. He started talking to her, really talking not as a fragile civilian he needed to shield, but as a partner in his confinement. He told her about his father, Don Franco Moretti, a man he both revered and resented. "He was a lion," Alessandro said one evening, swirling amber liquid in his glass as they sat in the now silent library. "He built this empire from nothing, but he ruled with fear. He trusted no one, not even his own blood. He taught me to be strong, to be ruthless, but he never taught me how to be happy." He looked into the fire, his eyes distant. He was killed by a car bomb, a betrayal from his most trusted couple. I was 22. I had to become him overnight. For the first time, Elena saw beyond the Mafia dawn. She saw a young man who'd had the weight of a violent kingdom thrust upon his shoulders, a man who had to bury his own identity to become the leader his world demanded. It didn't excuse his life, but it explained it. A sliver of empathy, unwelcome but persistent, took root in her heart. He saw the change in her, the softening of her fear into a cautious curiosity. He decided to trust her not just with her own safety, but with his. One afternoon, he brought an old, fired, damaged ledger into the library. Its leather cover was charred, and the pages were brittle and stained. He placed it carefully on her work table, which he'd had moved from her studio, along with her most essential tools. "This was my father's," he explained. "It's from the year before he died. It's written in a simple substitution cipher he used for his private accounts. I've had cryptographers look at it, but the fire and water damage from the explosion made much of it illegible. They couldn't recover enough to make sense of it." He looked at her, his gaze intense. "The traitor who gave up my route to the Falconies. I believe the answer to who it is lies in here. My father was meticulous. He recorded every transaction, every alliance, every betrayal. I think he knew someone was moving against him." He paused, then laid the bargain bare. "You restore things. You bring legibility to the damaged and faded. Can you help me read this? Help me find the man who is trying to kill me. The man who is responsible for you getting hurt. Help me end this, Elena, and I swear I will give you your life back." It was a test and a plea. He was offering her a way out, but the path led directly through the heart of his dark world. For a long moment she stared at the ruined book. It was a relic of a violent past, a testament to a life of crime. But it was also just a book damaged in need of repair. It was what she did. "I'll try," she said, her voice quiet but firm. For the next week, they worked side by side in the library. It became their world. Elena, with her delicate tools, painstakingly separated the brittle pages, treating them with chemical solutions to reduce the staining and enhance the faded ink. Alessandro sat with her watching with a quiet awe as she worked her magic. He would explain the context, the names of families, the slang for certain transactions, the undercurrents of power she couldn't possibly know. In those long hours, the walls between them began to crumble. She saw the sharp intellect behind his intimidating presence, the strategic mind that kept his empire running. He saw the fierce intelligence and quiet strength in her, the resilience that had allowed her to survive in his world. The forced proximity was a crucible for the simmering attraction between them. The brush of his hand as he passed her a tool, the low timbre of his voice as he deciphered a name, the moments their eyes would meet over the ancient ledger. It was an intimacy more potent than any touch. One night they were working late. Elena had finally managed to restore a key passage, a series of payments from a Moretti shell corporation to an offshore account. The name of the account holder was almost completely obscured. "I can almost make it out," she murmured, leaning closer, a magnifying glass in her hand. "It starts with an N." Nico Alessandro frowned. "My cousin Nico Moretti. He manages some of our legitimate businesses on the docks. He's ambitious, but he's family." The dismissal was automatic, but a seed of doubt was planted. Elena looked up at him, the lamp on the table casting a warm glow on their faces. They were so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. The rest of the world, the danger, the guards, all of it faded away, until there was only the two of them in the quiet, book-lined room. "You trust no one," she said softly, echoing his father's lesson. "But you trust him. He's my blood." Alessandro said, his voice rough with a conflict she could now see warring within him. His gaze dropped from her eyes to her lips. The air grew thick, heavy with unspoken desire. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. But she didn't. She was tired of fighting, tired of being afraid. In that moment, he wasn't the dawn. He was just a man, haunted and lonely, who looked at her as if she were the only thing in his world that made sense. She met him halfway. His lips were firm, yet surprisingly gentle. The kiss was not one of passion and fire, but of quiet desperation and profound connection. It was a surrender for both of them. He was surrendering his isolation, and she was surrendering her fear. His hand came up to cup her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheek as if she were something precious. The kiss deepened, speaking of shared secrets and the silent understanding that had grown between them over the damaged pages of his father's life. When they finally broke apart, they rested their foreheads together, breathing the same air. "Elena," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't name. She had made her bargain with the devil, and as she looked into his dark, vulnerable eyes, she realized with a terrifying certainty that she was no longer sure she wanted her old life back. The kiss changed everything. The professional barrier they had erected while working on the ledger was gone, replaced by a tentative, fragile intimacy. There was a new current running through the penthouse, a shared secret, a silent acknowledgement that they had crossed a line from which there was no return. But the world outside the library walls had not stopped turning, and the threats were still very real. With the name Nico as a lead, Alejandro tasked Leo with a discreet but deep investigation into his cousin's finances and recent activities. Outwardly, Alessandro treated Nico, summoning him for meetings discussing business as usual. The performance was flawless, but Elena could see the toll it was taking on him. Betrayal from an enemy was business. Betrayal from family was a wound to the soul. Working with renewed urgency, Elena focused on the pages surrounding the payments to Nico's account. days of meticulous work yielded another breakthrough. She managed to restore a series of dates and notations next to the payments. They were coordinates and dates. Alessandro recognized them immediately. "These are shipping manifests," he said, his voice grim as he cross-referenced the dates with old records on his laptop. "These are dates my father's shipments went missing hijacked. Everyone assumed it was the Falcone, but the payments to Nico were made 2 days after each hijacking." The picture was now horrifyingly clear. Nico had been selling out his own family, his own uncle, for years, funneling money and power to himself, while the Falcones took the blame. He had likely been the one to leak the information about the car bomb that killed Don Franco, and he was the one who had given Alessandro's route to the Falcones the day Elena was shot. He was playing both sides, hoping to weaken Alessandro enough to make his own move for power with the Falcones as his muscle. "He was there," Alessandro said, his voice hollow with disgust. "At my father's funeral he stood beside me. He swore vengeance on the men who did it." The betrayal was absolute, a serpent he had harbored in his own house. The final piece of the puzzle was a single faded word Elena managed to recover from the bottom of the page next to the final payment. Patria. The Patria. Alessandro breathed his eyes wide with dawning horror. "It's an old freighter ship. My father bought it for scrap metal years ago. It's been moored at the abandoned docks in Nikiko's territory ever since. He's been using it as his base of operations right under our noses." The plan was set. Alessandro would move against Nico that night quietly and lethally, with a small team of his most loyal men. He was done playing games. He was going to cut the head off the snake. He insisted Elena remain in the penthouse in the safe room, a hidden fortified chamber behind the library with 2 guards. "No arguments, Elena. Not this time. When this is over, we talk about everything. But first I have to end this." He kissed her, a hard, desperate kiss, filled with promises and the bitter taste of impending violence. As she was being led to the safe room, Elena's friend, Clarara's voice echoed in her mind. Clarara, who had no idea where she was, who likely thought she was missing or worse. Desperate to give her friend some sign, however small, she convinced one of the younger, less severe guards to let her use his phone for just a moment, claiming she needed to deactivate an automatic payment for her studio's rent to avoid suspicion. "Just a text," she pleaded. "It will look normal." Reluctantly, the guard agreed, watching over her shoulder. Her fingers flew across the screen, typing a message to Clarara. "Everything is okay. Complicated. I'm safe. Tell you everything soon." But as she typed, a sudden chilling thought struck her. Nico wasn't stupid. If he suspected Alessandro was on to him, he wouldn't just wait to be cornered. He would have a contingency plan, a trump card. And what was Alessandro's one glaringly new vulnerability? Her. Her blood ran cold. The guard was looking at his watch, impatient. Thinking fast, she added a final seemingly innocuous line to the text. "Stuck on a project. It's a real patrie." She hit send, just as the guard took the phone back. It was a long shot. A desperate breadcrumb dropped into the digital ether. Clarara was a puzzle enthusiast. They did crosswords together. She might not get it, but it was the only thing Elena could think to do. Her premonition became a terrifying reality. Less than an hour later, the guards outside her safe room door were suddenly engaged in a frantic, muffled exchange. Then a single gunshot and silence. The reinforced door hissed open. It wasn't Alessandro who stood there. It was his cousin, Nico Moretti. He was slighter than Alessandro, with a nervous energy and eyes that darted around the room. He held a gun, and his smile was a sickly sweet mask of triumph. Behind him, 2 of his men dragged the bodies of Alejandro's guards away. The infiltration was clean surgical. He had his own men on the inside. "Elena Vance," Nikiko said, his voice smooth and unsettling. "The little bookworm who started a war. My cousin has a new weakness, it seems, and I'm here to exploit it. You and I are going for a little boat ride." The last thing she saw before a cloth was pressed over her face, and the world dissolved into a chemical haze was Nico's triumphant sneer. The traitor's final gambit wasn't to run or to fight Alessandro on his own terms. It was to steal the one thing he now valued more than his own empire. Alessandro felt the trap spring the moment he and his men arrived at the abandoned docks. The freighter, the Patria, was dark and silent. Too silent. A chilling emptiness hung in the damp, salty air. Leo Giordano, his hand resting on the grip of his weapon, confirmed his fears. "It's a ghost ship, boss. No one's here." Just then Alessandro's phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered, his voice ice. "Where is he looking for me?" Cousin Nikicho's voice was tiny and triumphant over the speaker. "You're in the wrong place. I decided to move our meeting, and I brought a guest. She's a lovely girl. It's a shame you put her in this position." A cold, black rage, hotter and more absolute than anything he had ever felt, washed over Alejandro. "If you touch her, Nico, you'll do what." Nico laughed. A high, manic sound. "You'll come and get her." Warehouse 7. The old Falcone territory. You have 1 hour. Come alone, Alex, or the bookworm gets a new chapter written in her blood. And just so you know, I'm serious. A scream tore through the phone. Elena's. It was cut short, followed by the sickening sound of a slap. Alejandro's knuckles turned white as he gripped the phone. "I'm coming," he snarled, and the line went dead. "It's suicide." Lau stated, his face grim. "Going into their territory alone." "He has Elena," Alejandro said. The words like stones in his throat. His entire emir, all the power and wealth meant nothing. His world had narrowed to a single point, getting her back. But then his pocket buzzed again. It was a text from an unknown number. He opened it. "Patria. My friend Elena sent this. It's a code word we use. It means something is wrong." I tracked her phone. She's not moving. Warehouse 7. I've sent the location and this message to the Vidya PD anonymous tip line. They won't get there fast, but they're coming. Please save my friend, Clara Ara. A fierce, desperate hope surged through him. Elena's brilliance, Clara Ara's loyalty. He had a chance. He looked at Leo. He said, "I have to come alone." A savage grin touched his lips. He didn't say anything about you. Inside Warehouse 7. Elena was tied to a chair, her cheek stinging from where Nico had struck her. The warehouse wire of stale sea otter and rust. Marco Falcone, a hulking man with dead eyes, stood with his men watching the exchange with a predatory amusement. "He'll never come alone," Marco grunted. "He's not a fool." "Oh, he will," Nikiko said, pacing in front of Elena. "For her, he's the biggest fool in the world." The warehouse doors groaned open. Alessandro walked in his hands, raised in a gesture of surrender. He was alone. His dark eyes immediately found Elena's, and in them she saw a promise. A storm of retribution was coming. "Here I am, Nikiko." Alessandro said, his voice calm, belying the fury simmering beneath. Let her go. This is between us. It always has been. Nico spat, his jealousy and resentment pouring out. You the golden sun. I was always in your shadow. Well, the sun is setting, cousin. He gestured to Falcone. Kill him. As Falcone's men raised their weapons, a series of silenced gunshots echoed from the rafters above. 2 of the Falcone gunmen dropped before they even knew what was happening. Leo and 3 of Alejandro's best men, hidden in the shadows, had opened fire. All hell broke loose. The warehouse erupted into a chaos of gunfire. Alejandro dove behind a stack of crates, returning fire with a gun he had strapped to his ankle. Elena screamed as bullets ricocheted around her. Nico panicked, grabbed Elena, using her as a human shield, dragging her towards a back exit. Stop shooting or she dies. Alejandro saw it. He rose from cover, his weapon lowered. Let her go, Nico. It was the opening Nico needed. He raised his own gun, aiming it squarely at Alejandro's heart. But in that split second, Elena did the only thing she could. She stomped down hard on Nikiko's instep with the heel of her shoe. He grunted in pain, his aim faltering for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Alejandro fired twice. The shots were clean, precise. Nico crumpled to the ground, his eyes wide with surprise, the gun clattering from his hand. In the ensuing silence, as Leo and his men finished subduing the remaining Falcone crew, Alessandro ran to Elena, cutting her bonds with a knife. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest, his face buried in her hair. Are you okay? Did he hurt you? He asked, his voice rough with emotion, as he checked her face, her arms, his hands shaking slightly. I'm okay, she whispered, clinging to him. She had never felt so safe in her life as she did in that moment, surrounded by the carnage of his world. In the aftermath, the police arrived, drawn by Clarara's anonymous tip. Leo, ever the professional, had a story ready. A rival gang shootout, with Alejandro and Elena as innocent bystanders, caught in the middle. It was messy, but it would hold. The Moretti name still held power in Vidia City. Days later, back in the pristine quiet of the penthouse, the storm had passed. Nico was gone. The Falcone family was in disarray, and the immediate threat was neutralized. Alejandro stood with Elena on the balcony. The city light spread out before them like a blanket of fallen stars. The bandage on her shoulder was long gone, but a faint silvery scar remained. It's over, he said. You're free, Elena. I'll set you up with a new identity, a new life. Anywhere you want to go, my people will watch over you from a distance. You'll never have to see this world or me again. It's the life you deserve. He was offering her the escape she had once desperately craved, the quiet, the normal, the safe. She looked at her scar, a permanent reminder of the day she ran into his life. The damage she had once told him is part of the story. She turned to him, her gaze unwavering. And what if I don't want that life anymore? She asked softly. What if the story isn't over? He looked at her, his heart in his eyes. He had been prepared for her to leave. He wasn't prepared for her to stay. Elena, my life, it will always have this danger. There will always be another enemy, another fight. I can't promise you safety. I'm not looking for safety, she replied, reaching up to touch the faint scar on his cheek from the warehouse fight. I stopped looking for that the day I met you. I'm looking for a life, a real one, with you. A slow smile, genuine and radiant, spread across Alejandro's face. It transformed him, chasing away the shadows of the dawn and revealing the man underneath. He took her hand, his fingers lacing with hers. "Then stay," he whispered, sealing his promise with a kiss. "Stay, and we'll face the world together." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was a choice made with eyes wide open, a promise forged in violence and sealed by love. She was no longer just Elena Vance, the book restorer. She was the woman who had stood by the dawn, the woman who had saved him in more ways than one. And in his dangerous, chaotic world, she had finally found her own story. And so Elena's quiet life was over. But a new, more thrilling chapter had just begun. She chose a love born from danger, a man who was both her protector and the source of the storm itself. Their story is not one of simple happy endings, but of complex choices, unwavering loyalty, and a passion that burns brightest in the darkest of nights. They have scars, both visible and hidden. But these are not marks of damage. They are the proof of their survival, the testament to a love that was forged in gunfire and sealed with a promise. What did you think of Elena and Alejandro's journey? Was her choice brave or foolish? Let us know in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story of love and danger, don't forget to hit that like button. Share it with a friend who loves a good drama, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more intense tales you won't want to miss. Thank you for listening.